student of his said that the group that she's worked with and developed here in Ithaca would have to perform for Dr. Ben. Given that they performed in Syracuse for Jesse Jackson when he came through and campaigned, they thought that they should put on a performance for Dr. Ben. The group here is composed of youngsters from Ithaca. They're under the direction of Denise Lee, Jonathan Smith, and Martha Smith, okay? Millie Clarke, and Denise Lee, who's a former student of Dr. Ben, who went to Harlem Academy and came here to Ithaca, Cornell, and studied further. I'd like to say a few words. Denise.
Good evening, everyone. Very true. And fellow friends, visitors, students, faculty, parents, moms, dads, I guess I feel very, very, very warm this evening actually, because I was telling Dr. Ben earlier that this is the first year that we ventured out, the youth group, Young Gifted and Black, and got on the road. We ventured out to Syracuse. All of this, actually, somewhat of mishaps in planning. I'm not quite sure if you realize that Jesse Jackson was to come to Ithaca, and the plans changed, and we then decided to go where he was, and we said we were going to go wherever he was, and that happened to be Syracuse. The children have come a long ways. We've been meeting as a youth group for 7 years, ages 7 through 17, second grade actually through high school, and I'm very, very proud of them. We've performed, they have performed for, oh my gosh, Coretta Scott King. They've been in the presence of James Baldwin and Gwendolyn Brooks, and I guess I could go on and on and on. And this evening, in honor of Dr. Ben. Mr. Jonathan Smith is our new pianist for this year, and Mrs. Martha Smith and Mrs. Millie Clarke. I do all of the PR work, and it's kind of mom and pop operation here, but we have a lot of support from, and have had oodles of support from the Africana Studies Center. We've had a rich and wonderful relationship with Dr. James Turner and Bob Harris, Dr. Harris, and I'm really happy to again be a part of this program in honor of Dr. Ben. Thank you very much for having us here.
First number is the greatest number of all. Good night, please. are these little darlings. We want to give the camera angle a better view of the most beautiful faces in the room. Excuse me. Second song is a cappella. I don't sing. All right, ready? This is a cappella. Ready? All going to do it together. That's exactly what it is.
Cut it off.
Shut it off.
Also very heartwarming to see so many different kinds of crisscross of generations. You know, that's so important today, the generational mix. We don't get enough of that. When you hear a presentation like this brother has done, the only thing it does, it makes your heart leap up in your throat, you know? And you think to yourself, there ought to be just some way, you know, that we ought to be able to see that this goes out to black youth and black middle youth and black young people and black adults all across the country, you know? I mean, you just say that to yourself. The one thing I think it helps, it should say to all of you who are at that point in your life where you're raising young people, that you need to get these tapes. You need to get these tapes, and you can't be, what they say, abashed about it. You must be unabashed. If you want the results at the final end, you have to see that they see these tapes. My wife has said to me at some time recently, she said, the point is that you really should take the time, and we should have taken the time to indoctrinate the young when they're young. You know, and I've said that to others. So often you're so busy doing so many other things and traveling, attempting to do this, you just assume that this information is going to be passed off. I think the other thing that we do is that we underappreciate the tremendous impact of the influence that comes from all quarters, formal and informal, on our youth. And one of the great stresses going on in black families today is a dichotomy of between what we had wished that our young people would know in terms of what they do know. And so what I would say is that whatever it is that this young brother is offering, it can't be enough for us to go out and buy those tapes. Because maybe we can turn, as we say, his technology to our advance. You know, it looked like it used to be a spendthrift to buy a VCR. But maybe that might be the most useful thing for each family right now. When you can begin to collect tapes like this and put it in to the house and sit your young in front of the house and in front of that TV and make them work. We thought that the TV was an enemy, but perhaps it can become a service. So it's a tremendous debt of gratitude that we owe to you, brother, for this sort of very eloquent and precise presentation. Of course, we know that the gratitude is ultimately to the master teacher, you know. Yes?
No, I just wanted to say that the young people that just came in are my sons and daughters. There are some who are coming.
Well, anybody knows Dr. Ben, that's all they talk about is children. Children and more children. Grands and more grands. So, very good. We're right now at roughly about where we were supposed to be ending. You know, and I guess that's probably about how African time is. We always allow ourselves to be victimized by that, but I don't think we ought to do that, you know. It creates all kinds of stress and hypertension and heartaches for other folks, you know, and they keep talking about us, the way we operate, you know. They operate when they, but there are, of course, some realistic parameters, which is, at this point, we don't own this place, you know. And so we do have to abandon it fairly shortly, and that isn't something in the tune of 30 minutes at the outmost 40 minutes. The other thing is we do want to allow some time for those of you who feel inclined to fraternize a little bit this evening and talk and get to know each other, and for others who need to go to sleep, to do that as well, so we can be up, in fact, and be on time tomorrow. Because we have a very, very extensive program tomorrow that we will have to sort of follow in line. You know, worst thing you do is make the cook angry, you see, and we had to probably, what happened is by the time you're too late to get there, what you eat won't be worth eating, you know, you keep trying to heat it. So we're going to have to try to stay on time, so we really want to end reasonably soon so that people can go on in and get situated and get rested and whatnot and get up. So we're going to ask all of us, myself included, all of our orators, our oral historians, to try to, in some way, telescope what they want to say to us this evening so we can be out of here, hopefully, in 30 to 35 minutes. And thank you, Sister Kefa. I see you winked over there to Brother Len Jeffries. I appreciate that help. We don't have it, man, like we used to have in Harlem, who would reach out with the stick, and yank you up. We may have to throw a rope on him tonight, so we can stay within. I would like, if I may, to do just something off the schedule. When I was saying the generations that are so important, also there is a generation of students who have gone through the Africana studies and research. And I think that's important to show you some measure. People in undergraduate, graduate students, not talking about the people who are here, because I have everybody standing, but just a few of those people who have come back. There are a couple, few of them that I see in the audience. I wonder if they might just stand so you could see them. They stretch almost over about 10, 15 years if they did. Almost stretch over the length of the time you needed. You saw some of those faces up until the current. Well, at this point, what we want to do is to do, I guess, the African tradition, which is to pay tribute as best we can, to toast. Brother Harris said, this is not going to be a toast. We're not going to tilt the glass at this point, so this is going to be the toast of the word. And we're going to ask a few people to come forward at this point to do that. And what I will attempt to do is pretty much follow as we have on the schedule. What we'd like to do, I guess, of course, to start with, is to ask our other most distinguished master teacher, colleague and friend, and elder, Professor John Henry Clarke.
Dr. Ben, so I won't say much on it tonight, but I think there is a higher honor that can come to people like Dr. Ben and for researchers who devote a greater portion of their life trying to find the place of African people in the history of the world. I think it is the role of the teacher, the thinker, the preacher even, to ask and answer the question, how will my people stay on this earth? We have not exacted those terms from teachers. We have not made them accountable to us. And we have let people function in our behalf without any kind of discipline and any kind of regimentation. We let speakers come up and speak for us without getting our permission to do so. I think the highest honor that can come to any scholar is for you to read their works and understand the nature of the works and understand the nature of the commitment. I have been informing quite a few of my students because I'm thinking this over at 73, some things that I should have thought over at 23, but both Ben and I have over 50 years of our life invested in the search for the proper place of African people in world history. He has a multiplicity of talent, and so have I. I never met a rich man who had a better mind than me. Therefore, if I wanted to make it as a rich man, I think I could have made it. Ben and I are people of moderate means. We will leave our family very much in a material sense, but we want to leave a legacy of the people who tried to search and tried to understand that history is a clock that people use to tell the time of day, and it is a compass that people use to find themselves on the map of human geography. And if drawing from his work, you will understand that Nile Valley civilization did not leave the world. The people were dispersed, went into other parts of Africa, but Nile Valley civilization became part of the totality of African people in their life everywhere. And it did not leave, and it became part of other civilizations, bits and pieces, integrated itself into the totality of other great river civilizations. And if you look at Sheikh Anta Diop's culture unity of Africa, what he's trying to call your attention to is that these cultures did not perish, but became a part of Africa's totality. Now, if we have done only one thing in our journey away from Africa, searching for Africa, producing scholars, producing a whole lot of things in spite of hardships. But if we had done only one thing just to survive, if that's all we have done, we are free forever of the stigma of inferiority, because no other people would have survived. I'm concluding. And I beg you to remember, our Holocaust started 500 years ago and is still going on.
Thank you.
But we start our count at 60 million, not 6. And many people who are now crying tears must remember that in the totality of our history, we never made a giant frying pan and fried people. We never had any ovens, because there was a common humanity that ran through the totality of our history. And I think the meaning of Dr. Ben's work is he's trying to call your attention to that humanity that we gave the world once and might yet have to give the world again.
Yes.
Thanks so much. I'd like to move along and make a slight alteration in keeping with our own tradition and respect our elders. I'd like to ask Sister Kefa if she would come next.
Brothers and sisters. Statement as a tribute to Dr. Ben, and which I am very honored to read to you tonight on this historic occasion. The significance of Dr. Ben's contribution to African life places him in the ranks of our African immortals. Dr. Ben has for over 50 years researched, analyzed, written, and presented to the world at large, and the African community in particular, a wealth of truthful information unsurpassed by anyone. His studies of African high culture are singular in their documentation and a model of African scholarship. Doc's basic premise of African history has been, there is no prehistory. Only history that we remain ignorant of and categorized that way in order to mask European-induced ignorance in regards to the African origin of human life. We of African community are profoundly grateful for Dr. Ben's persistent commitment to our African education, free of mystification and clear of vision. The polemical character of Dr. Ben's written and oral presentation befits the character of an African warrior.
Yes.
He, more than anyone else, has taught us the use of African history as the foundation of African liberation. Dr. Ben presents our history as an undying, ever-unfolding panorama of accumulated wisdom, ever present for our understanding and a guide to our unfolding future as a race. Many people, hypnotized by the structure and strictures of an institutionalized European worldview, are dismayed and angered by the reemergence of the African worldview, centered in African world history, reflective of African world culture, developed and continually developing. Dr. Ben stands in the forefront of this re-emerging intellectual vanguard. We of the African community are now conscious of how grossly miseducated we have been as to who we really are. The teaching of Dr. Ben has led us to examine the process of miseducation to which we all have been subjected during the last 500 years. The mental genocide pioneered and propagated by the European oppressor and now expressed by every national and racial group seeking a place in the network of economic, social, and political oppression and exploitation can no longer withstand the re-emerging free African mind.
Yes.
Yes, Dr. Ben is dangerous.
Yes.
He has provided us with this basic for our African liberation. Yes, Dr. Ben has told us to know the enemies of African life. Yes, Dr. Ben has made known to us that African life is based on balance, signified by my art. And yes, Dr. Ben has told us that our sacred mission is to bring this world to balance. We live in a very dangerous period of time, and the dimensions of our problems have to be clearly seen. And the condition we must create to resolve the problem must be clearly charted. Because of the life and teaching of Dr. Ben, we are certainly better equipped to tackle this situation than we were before. In our opinion, there are two essential components that must be grasped by all Africans in order to guarantee an African future and save this planet from European madness and final destruction. We Africans must learn and draw the lesson of our African past history, rooted in African consciousness and African morality, and opposing the accumulation of profit and the worship of money as the goal of human life. We return to the ancient dictum, man, know thyself.
Yes.
The second component flows from the first. The individual potential of the entire African race must be nurtured and unfolded so that its collective unity can be achieved and our overarching goal can be accomplished. Liberation and freedom for the African race, leadership for all that is human. Brother Yosef and Jochannan, we carry your teaching into the coming ages. We are proud of you as you are proud of us. Ra has granted you grace for having guided and loved his children, as did Ra, the creative force. Yem Hotep, we all one.
Also no stranger to this African community, Brother Leonard Jeffries.
Okay, brothers and sisters. Some of our New York family thought I wasn't going to make it. But I don't intend to say very much now because we do have tomorrow. And I don't intend to say very much because there's a little bit of confusion with Brother Harris and Brother Turner. They told me that this was a toast. I had prepared my remarks because I thought they said this was a roast. So I have come prepared to roast. But since that's not fitting at this time, I'll have to hold my roast until another time. I did not intend to say much this evening and didn't expect many of us to have anything much to say, and because I thought it would be very fitting to have this young brother who represents the best of us and the best that we can grow to become to initiate the process. And I asked Brother Harris, and he responded very correctly, and getting Brother Quasey here. So, I mean, he has said it all and has done it all. And can you imagine? He didn't bring his second tray. He only had one slide tray. And so you can imagine what the brother has done in terms of monumentally putting those images together and making them speak for themselves. I sat back there and said, if I could just get $1,000, maybe I could offer him $1,000 to copy those slides for me so I could use them. But better than that, we need to get Gilbert Noble. Sit down with the brother and work out how we can have that projected on New York TV, WABC, like it is, so that 1.5 million of us can see that. And as a tribute to Dr. Ben, I think I have to get Gilbert to do that. And so I will make sure that I'll be moving on that. The beauty of Dr. Yosef Ben Jochannan and our relationship, meaning our collective family, is that this scholarship, this knowledge, this awakening of Africanness has been about family. And he's epitomized that. He has maintained himself as a master in terms of the word, a master in terms of leading us and guiding us, showing us the light. But more than anything else, he didn't elevate himself on a platform and said, I'm up here looking down at you all. He said, I am family. I'm an extension of an African family going back through time, and you're an extension of me. The beauty of Dr. Yosef Ben Jochannan is this concept of family, which is mind-blowing and mind-boggling. The two old men here, that's on James. I expected Dr. John Henry Clarke to be, you know, he was supposed to be going through a trauma this week. But instead he comes looking strong, standing up there smart, So I see what happens when those two get together. Can you imagine? When they get together, they sort of interact with each other, two brothers, comrades, and they build each other up and carry each other spiritually. And that's what it's all about. They set a model for us. Most of our generation and generations behind us is kicking each other in the butt, talking about each other, not doing, working with each other. These brothers love each other, work together in a harmony, in a brothership, which is an extraordinary. They disagree, but they know how to disagree. They know how to support. They are models of what we're talking about in terms of family. So that's what it's all about. And Dr. Ben would not be satisfied if 1,000 of us came. You know, because he knows we love him. If he did not have his physical, biological family with him. So I'm glad that the brothers and sisters got here so they can speak about that. And somebody who Dr. Ben did not introduce, but Gertrude and I had gotten together on this and we were prepared to roast Dr. Ben, but then since it doesn't fit, Gertrude and I can't do our roast. Dr. Ben has a partner who has been with him, can give him that type of support, who comes to the activities, and there she is, Sister Gertrude. So we need to her standing over. Anyone that can stay that close to Dr. Ben that long is somebody special. Everybody fool you about Sister Gertrude. Dr. Ben gives us the whip and the slash and the lash all the time. Why? Because he wants us to be right. He whipped us into shape to get ASCAT going in New York. And we came up with a beautiful family thing. He whipped us into shape so that we could go to the Nile. Can you imagine 800 to 1,000 black people going to the Nile? Ain't happened before. I hope it happens again, but I ain't prepared to do it again. But it was a wonderful tribute to Dr. Ben and Dr. Clarke that we came together as a family, brought our generations and our scholars, and went as a family. It hasn't been done like that before. We don't do things like that. Usually we get together as scholars and go and interact incestuously with each other. But when we went to the Nile, Dr. Ben had set down a whole family framework that we have been operating on for many years, and that's what we did. 1968-69, my life was changed. James Turner's life was changed because we began to interact with the old man, 73-year-old Dr. Clarke. We ain't been the same, John.
That's right.
James, because of John. And luckily, James Turner, with his family here, his extended family, has honored these brothers. They've been flying back and forth in those little rickety planes, listening to their life and their contribution to the African community, coming up here to do something in Cornell. I wouldn't do it. No amount of money would have me flying in those little rickety planes. So Dr. Ben has done
He
it.
ain't lying, y'all. He drove from Syracuse.
But there's a special family thing, a bond that has been welded together that has the Dr. Bens and the Dr. Clarks coming way up into these woods so they can be a beacon. They're up here in the woods. That's one of the reasons I'm going to Syracuse, so I can drive that little hour and look at the trees and the bees and the cows and stuff. But they have been a beacon for these youngsters who would otherwise be lost to us. Because this whole educational process is to suck you into whiteness so that you can become oblivious to who and what you are and the contribution that you can make to your people. So I know that James has needed that support and he's gotten it from these brothers. That was 68, 69. Dr. Clarke has been the biggest thing that happened to me for those 20 years. Then in 78, 79, another thing was being hooked up. And another milestone in my experience in my life, in my awakening, was the relationship that had been welded together between the First World Alliance, Sister Kefa and Bill Jones and their family, and Dr. Ben. And they were making this thing come alive, this whole African understanding around the Nile and the significance of all of that. And so 78, 79 was another change for me. You know, that's when I began to work on another doctorate. Just like I started working on mine when I sat at the feet of Dr. Clarke with James Turner and others. And that doctorate in what the significance of Nile Valley civilization was what happened out of their relationship with the First World. There ain't nothing like it. People run out of the subway, people running here and there to come up to that 145th Street and Continental so we can commune. Like what? Not a scholar, but as a family. To purge ourselves of all of that garbage that we've had to ingest from the TV, from the books, from the newspapers, from these educational institutions. We come together and get actually purified. You get rid of all of that. You're ready to go and struggle after that experience. And then we have to give a great tribute to Dr. Ben and his partners, Sister Kefa and Bill Jones, for laying that thing together for us. So that's what it's about. It's about family. Ain't about no books that you done wrote. Burn them. In fact, I'm mad because I didn't know Brother Alexander was going to be here, and I would have had Dr. Ben's books. I loved my little briefcases full of books. Dr. Ben, he's got the thickest books of any scholar. And they're bigger than any other books. So I've got about 5 or 6 of them, lugging them through the airports, etc. But it ain't about the books. It's about this knowledge and information about the value system that raised people from a low level throughout the world and raised them to a higher level of looking at and understanding God and making God real for themselves. And if there's a great tribute to Dr. Ben, he has let us know that it ain't about the books, it ain't about the monuments, it ain't about the temples. It's about the spiritual value system that produced all of that, that you are a manifestation of, and it's with that that you can go on and change the world. Thank you, Dr. Ben.
Thank you, my brother, Dr. Jeffries, who all of you know is the chairman of the Black Studies Department at City College of New York, and has been a major standard bearer there. In the midst of a deep kind of struggle, you could stand this long at City College knowing what that is. I don't need to say much more. It's a tribute to itself. We want to add one addition. Someone else, again, who's not a stranger to those of us here. Brother Harold Diggs would like to provide a very brief message from the ASCAP Youth Institute.
Dr. Ben Ben, Sister Irma Aline called me last night and asked me to read this. She couldn't be here, but she said I just had to read this from the ASCAP Eastern region of the Youth Institute. Hotep Dr. Ben, we, the members of the ASCAP Eastern Region Institute for Youth, love you and wish you only the best of what the rest of your life must bring you, as you continue to enlighten all those who are absorbing your wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. We know that the dictionary definition of the word retirement only applies to your professorship at Cornell University. So we look forward to many, many, many more years of the privilege and honor of being transformed by you into the African ourselves. And we commit ourselves to impart this knowledge to all of our children in order to ensure our prosperity. Shem Hotep, Eastern Region Institute, ASCAP. I would like to say for myself, the first time I ever heard of Dr. Ben was in 1968 when he was teaching school at Harlem Prep. And my son was a student there. And my son came home and told me, said, Dr. Ben said the Bible's a joke. And I wasn't ready for that. And I told him, what? He said, Dr. Ben said the Bible's a joke. He was going all out in Staten Island with Dr. Ben. And I said, hush, son, don't let none of the rest of the family. And I'm like Brother Kwesi, little did I know that I would have grown to where I am today, that I am now teaching in prisons and in Naira Institute because of Dr. Ben. He not only taught me, he taught my son, he taught my wife, he taught my older brother, and now he's working on my grandson, Roman.
We'd like next, of course, to invite another person, again, who's not a stranger to you. James, Charles, you need to make a switch?
Yes, sir. Yeah, I think that would be smart.
We'll let him make a switch, because what we want to do, as you can appreciate, is to keep a record. You know, we want to keep a record of it. So often, you know, all of us have been places, things have happened, and we've said we should have had a record of that, you know. One of the things I'm hoping to be involved with while I'm off in sabbatical working at Schaumburg, to get them to reconstruct the record of Brother Malcolm's years in Harlem. We've said that all too often that record was not preserved or produced or maintained, and that needs to be done. So we want to make sure that this record is done. While I'm doing that, I also want to say that we owe a great, great debt of gratitude and appreciation to these young brothers and sisters that you see here and who will be servicing you, seeing to your hospitality, running you up and down, standing here these long hours doing the recording. They are all doing that voluntarily. They are not paid. Dr. Ben, they just decided they would do it. I also want to say, while we're getting set, that those others, undergraduates who are here, if tonight, if for some reason or other you haven't given your name to Professor Harris, you really should do that before you leave. Are we ready? Okay, very fine. We'd like next, of course, to ask our brother James Small if he might share with us his comments.
We can't throw away all the books, Dr. Jeffries, because if we threw away African origins of major Western religion, I'd be in big trouble. I couldn't give any more lectures at the First World. But like Brother Dix, I heard of Dr. Ben in 1968-69 when I was chasing a little girl to death who was going prep. And I got to hear some of the lectures. I was heavy into the Muslim thing at that time. And about 79, I saw Islam and found myself without a life, without a God, without a place, and returned to New York, and Dr. Jeffries told me about a place called the First World. And at the First World was the same old man, 10 years later, Dr. Ben. And what happened to me after all those years and finding myself with no place in no universe, because the thing I had that I thought was a place in the universe was someone else's fantasy on the universe. And having gone into the First World and listened to Dr. Ben, and starting back to read Black Man of the Nile, and starting back to read African Origins, and taking the tapes and listening to it. And I'll just bring this brief, because I like a little dramatics when I do these things, and it's good for you, a little dramatics. That's African too. But given what Dr. Ben's working in the first chapter of this book is most of my lectures in the First World. If you really read this book and read the first chapters, you see it's most of what I do in terms of following what Dr. Ben said in the book, that we left the Nile Valley. We first came from the Great Lakes region, took those concepts and ideas that we call the Orishas and Voodoo and other things, took it to the Nile Valley, turned them into the Nephthys route. Later on, when we were attacked, we came back again after taking it to a high level and redisperse it and redesign our institutions again. So I'll end with this, Dr. Ben, because there's no way to thank you, other than to try and do as much of the work as is humanly possible, given what I've been able to understand from the teaching as I live my life. That's the only real thanks that could be given. But this thing, if we begin to read his writing and we begin to understand our system as he tries to allow us to understand that system, what we would see very immediately, if this was that time and we were of the consciousness that was intended to be, Dr. Ben would be proclaimed a deity.
Yes. Thank you.
We've seen it with Shango.
Yes.
We've seen it with Ptah. We understand that God was not a mystery removed from ourselves, but the best of ourselves mimicking all that is in the creation. And if anyone has done that well, it would be Dr. Yosef Ben Jochannan. And I would call him, for me, God of resurrection. So he was my deity of resurrection. Dr. Ben.
Come at that point where we're virtually at the end, and it falls upon me, I suppose, to try to give some reflection and some comment of my own. And I guess I want to sort of put it thusly. I've thought about what does it mean to make a tribute or a toast to Dr. Ben. First of all, it seems it is to pay tribute to the man and to his ideas, to his scholarship, to his courage, and to his values. For it is values that foremost represents the nature of one's commitment. They represent those objectives that you consider above all to be important in your personal mission in life. They represent who are the masters or gods you serve. Who it is that ultimately you seek to satisfy, whose recognition you seek, whose approval has deep psychological meaning for you. Dr. Ben's life and work has been a clear model on these questions. If you know him, you know that he has been concerned to see that education serves our people foremost and completely. That it challenges the falsity of European conclusions about the history of classical African civilizations and cultures. He has been driven by the necessity to establish the truth of Africa's gift to the world. But he has realized that it meant revealing the way the Europeans appropriated some of the best of Africa's wisdom for itself. That has not been an easy task. He has spared no effort in his lifelong pursuit of knowledge. But more so, he has been tireless in sharing and advocating and the advocation of his study and knowledge with all the rest of us. Long before it was hardly popular, long before it was even acceptable in Western academic circles, and America is an extension of Western academic circles, to speak of Africa's holistic inclusion of Egypt, of Kemet, and Nubia. Dr. Ben walked the lonely road, almost alone. When it didn't pay barely a livable wage, we need to point out, when these brothers talk about teaching in Harlem at these places, that barely paid a livable wage. You know, it's nice to stand up and talk about, I ran into him in these places and so forth, but that didn't pay much of a wage in those days. But nonetheless, he refused to abandon his quest, his search for knowledge, for the proofs for what he suspected to be the truth. He waged war on white racism and colonial mystification and falsifications. He has been uncompromising in his attempt to dethrone European dominance of the mind and its thinking processes. Sometimes he uses shock effects. Other times he cajoles to produce awareness. But in all times, his objective is to inspire learning. He has fathered 2 generations of scholars, and he has enriched his people the world over.
Yes.
The measure of Kemet is clear. ASCAC stands now as a viable, thriving organization. Young brothers stood before us, those who will speak tomorrow, owe their intellectual fatherhood to Dr. Yosef Ben Jochannan. When I decided to leave Evanston, somewhat at the hesitation of my family as they remind me, coming up to this place, and Northwestern, to assume the responsibility to develop the Africana Studies and Research Center, I did so for one reason and one reason alone, because I had been inspired and perhaps emboldened by the model of Dr. Ben and Dr. John Henry Clarke.
Yes.
I had known as a young man only briefly of J.A. Rogers, and only vicariously of Schomburg through the Pittsburgh Courier. But I accepted the duty of my generation to educate our youth for liberation and service to our people. Therefore, our first act was to reach for the support and the knowledge of our elders, those who had plowed the ground and fertilized the field, who understood the need for an Afrocentric direction. We wanted a balance in our program that represented those educators and scholars who were on the cutting edge of unearthing the knowledge of our heritage and our ancestors. And those who were unafraid and uncompromising in their challenge of European intellectual imperialism. And for those teachers who would be unashamed to inspire our youth in the classroom. So we, of course, naturally reached for Dr. Ben. And he came, Mohawk notwithstanding. See, y'all see, it's a pleasure these days to fly a Piedmont, but in those days it was Mohawk. You know, some people used to call it Slowhawk, and some called it No-Hawk. Coming up here in the winter, which is 9 months long, was a test of both fortitude and commitment as well. Finally, of course, we come to the seminal question. How is a legacy to be measured? What is the yardstick for the value of a life on this planet? Firstly, it is that you have tried to live the good life. But foremost, and perhaps in the last instance, it is how you have served your people.
Thank you.
And what you have left behind to benefit others. We can say, without contradiction, that Dr. Ben has set his roots squarely in his people.
Yes.
And he stood firmly on the rock of our culture and our heritage. And that has been his indomitable and his abiding contribution to us all, and it stands as a rock at this place here at Cornell. And we are grateful to him beyond words, and we wish now simply say there is no tribute, brother, that can measure both the value and the commitment that you've offered. Thanks so much. Well, I think we've stayed pretty much on time as well as we've been in time. We're about ready now to certainly to adjourn. We were asked, Brother Harris asked earlier if there were some cars that could help. If anybody's driving, want to take a few other people with you, if you have some extra space, we'd appreciate it. Other than that, the buses and the other forms of transportation will be out. Bob, is there something else? If not, then we'll all begin to move straight